I resent you, Tom, for giving me the short paddle. This is a loaner canoe. This is the best canoe we could do on short notice. And Tom has forced me to have the short paddle.
That is one of the privileges of being a commissioner.
I've got a blister.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
these wooden oars are just hell on my hands.
I mean, that oar looks like it was, used about, sometime in the 70s. And my friend.
Oar.
Perfect paddle for him.
Yeah. He has let me know how inadequate it is. So
people are making fun of me for my paddle.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
All right.
I will say I can see a bit of your shorts are revealing.
Oh, my butt?
Yeah.
All right. There's maybe just no way for me not to show you my butt crack the whole way through.
You know what? This is going to be an intimate journey.
Okay. We are here on Bde-Makaska in front of the new pavilion, which is always hopping every time I come by here, with Tom Olsen for a special canoe episode of the Wedge Live podcast. Tom Olsen is your favorite at-large commissioner on
That's
the
right.
Minneapolis Park and Rec Board, and we are canoeing.
We are recreating.
Tom, how's the campaign going?
Campaign's going well. I mean, we're seeing a lot of support. This time last year, I was trying to, convince people that I was an actual person.
As opposed to, the park board can draw some folks who are of dubious background, and so. But this year we're doing well. We got lots of endorsements. We're union supported. We're supported by a heck of a lot of folks from the legislature, folks from the county, folks from the city, and trying to we are quite rocking. Yeah,
if
Tom.
you are a listener.
I don't usually come out in a canoe, and I realize I prefer kayaks. Ooh.
Yeah,
oh my God.
All right.
This is not.
I think once we get through the canal here.
Yeah, it's much calmer once we get through over to Lake of the Isles, I hope.
Yeah, and we're all very concerned about the equipment.
Yeah, we have lots of podcasting equipment on this canoe, so this is a thrill ride. Okay.
Water levels going up onto the path.
Okay, yeah, let's.
Yeah, just push off.
Wow. This is oh man. Woo! We get out here on this canoe and I immediately regret even having this idea.
All right, now we are in calmer waters. That was intense.
Oh, this is more conversational. That's basically a river rapids ride.
Yeah, that is quite exhilarating. So we just let you do that. You can just come out and put in a boat. You could have little experience like us.
I resent you, Tom, for giving me the short paddle. This is a loaner canoe. This is the best canoe we could do on short notice. And Tom has forced me to have the short paddle.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the privileges of being a commissioner. And I thought we had to, there's a painted turtle. That was just swimming under us. I thought we were a little better outfitted, but I think we'll get through.
Tom has also told me that my butt crack is going to be showing for the whole episode, and we're not going to use that camera angle, but just know that's what he's looking at the whole ride.
I mean, we could just add some pixelation.
This is worse than the hammock episode where I showed my feet. I got a lot of comments about my feet. What are your top issues, Tom? What are the reasons people should send you back to the park board?
So number one, and why I ran 4 years ago, is open parkways. We had the pandemic. People needed to get out. They needed to find space. And so the park board made this kind of awesome, monumental, and just quick decision to open up our parkways to pedestrians, bikers, folks in mobility devices, and all these great things. And I think what we discovered is that our parkways can serve us in so many amazing ways beyond just serving as a way for people to commute to their work without needing to stop at a lot of stop signs and stoplights.
Why did that become such a controversial thing when what I remember of the pandemic is that was popular and not at all controversial, and people enjoyed being able to, it doesn't matter how you like to get around the city, once you're at a park, nobody likes to be in their car, be encumbered by automobile noises, have to worry about looking out for speeding car traffic. Like, people come out to the parks to enjoy them outside.
Yes, that is exactly right. And I think you realize once you don't have to contend with vehicles, I mean, you can be far more relaxed on those roads, and you can ride, 3 abreast with your friends, or you could walk, or if you have a dog that's maybe a little more reactive, you'll have more space if you're walking them. I mean, if you go around Lake Harriet right now, or Minneapolis, you go around any of those places and it's incredibly congested with pedestrians, and you have people walking off of the paths, and there's clearly a demand for more space. And you're right, it was very popular. We basically heard universally good things about it. The only problem is the park board was dealing with so much other stuff at the time during the pandemic, a lot of other kind of crises, that they didn't really take good data on how people were using it, where it was good, where it was effective. Were there issues with accessibility? Was it actually, the big thing that, people who ended up killing the pilot program that we were going to start at the start of this term to kind of get that data, is they were just saying the classic things of, people with disabilities will not be able to, they rely on these parkways and vehicles and single occupancy vehicles to get around. And same with folks who are seniors. And so we weren't able to kind of get the good data that shows that this is something that people wanted. And yeah, I mean, we found it was popular. We found that there were a lot of people coming out to support it. And our pilot program would have been really limited. It would have just been, creating, cheap mobile barriers. Because one of the problems with it was that, the signs that we had to rent from, Met Council, Met Transit, was really expensive. And so we're like, all right, let's find a cheaper way to do it, a more mobile way. And so then we can kind of do it in different spaces at different times. The whole pilot, probably, I think it would have cost something like $75,000 or $90,000. Really not a whole lot in terms of our overall budget. And that was killed. It was the folks came in, Karabucker came in, Senior Caucus came in, and it resonated with enough of my colleagues. They were also, the classic emergency vehicle argument was brought up.
Was that ever brought up in good faith? I've heard emergency vehicles about everything, even for bike lanes where emergency vehicles in the aftermath can ride in them. But emergency vehicles use bike lanes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and with this space, you would not have vehicles or cars to contend with if you had to go down a parkway.
Right.
And so you'd be able to go around the barrier, and people walking, rolling, biking, however they're getting around on those parkways would be able to clear out very easily, very quickly.
Yeah, it turns out bikes and pedestrians they're nimble enough, they can hop up on the grass, they can get out of your way immediately in a way that what am I going to do? I'm in a car, where can I go?
Yeah. For some people, it is good fit. It is genuine. I think they really think, so many folks are we are in a very car-centric society. So it really is, that's how you process things. And so without, things demonstrating that it's actually not an issue, although we had, the thing that's frustrating with the pandemic open parkways program was that we did show that there were not emergencies on our parkways that all of a sudden went unresolved.
Right.
There was not, people of all abilities were still able to access our parkways. There's still parking lots, there's still places around that you can stop, there's still handicap parking and disability parking and places to go. So 4 years ago, I saw that and I wanted more of that because it just seems very clear. Also, as a city, as we kind of move further away from car centrality, we should be doing that on our parks too. And it's a great way to make dynamic parks and dynamic spaces. So I'm running again to hopefully, if we get a more amenable park board, we can go back and start that, pilot again. That would be along West River Parkway, maybe go further. That's the optimistic part. And part of this is also, you say number one issue. For me, I've just been kind of oriented towards climate change, climate action, and making sure that as a city, in every facet of what we do, we are prioritizing climate resilience, climate justice, and moving away from autonormativity and carbon-centric lifestyles and way of doing things. And that's something that I think Open Parkways contributes to. I think it's in line with that policy. And so I'm just gonna, we have lots of votes like that, right? Where it's a decision between something that is better for climate and something that is maybe less bad for climate. And then something that's maybe not as good for climate, but it maybe has the support of, the status quo or something like that. Because people are all for climate action and climate change action, except for when it affects their specific lifestyle. And I think that's something that we saw at the mall, which I don't know if we want to talk about that now or later.
Do you want to talk about the mall?
We can talk about the mall.
It was just a couple of dozen parking spaces, right? It wasn't that many.
No, it's like 24, yep.
And so the Park Board commissioned a parking study that showed, it's okay. There's enough parking here. We can sacrifice 24 to add more green space, more trees. I've heard you at the Park Board talking about this, and you're like, where are my colleagues who care about impervious surface and making sure we have less pavement? Where are these people who claim they care about water quality and all that stuff? Mm-hmm. And so I'm just preaching to the choir here, but similar to the Open Parkways thing, it felt like unnecessarily controversial. And people talk about like the bike lobby and how militant that is. I feel like the like the pro-car lobby is as militant and less receptive to like data and...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's, the thing that I wish I did better, and I think what they did well, is they did good enough of going around to the nearby apartments and framing it as the park board is going to take away your free parking spaces. And so they were able to get renters who, that is, free parking is an asset that people, that enjoy having. You and I, we understand all the consequences of, we understand, from Shoups' wisdom that it's undervalued land. It adds these other things, it's just for, storage of private property on public land. It, increases runoff, it increases, urban heat island, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, your average person is just like, I just want to park close to my apartment. And so I wish if I could go back and, the mall, it's not, we still technically have the master plan, or like the overarching plan there, and we're still supposed to follow that. It's just going to be more expensive, more efficient, and it's going to be harder to implement.
And it's going to be like decades in the future now, right? Like, why would they rip it up again?
Exactly. I mean, it's still coming up. So we have like our matrix of neighborhood parks that, come up onto our, when they are supposed to be redone. And so that it is still in that list. It's still on the way, but you're exactly right. And so, I think maybe there's something we could have done, with the renters. We could say, okay, maybe we'll grandfather the renters in the area in. For the other spaces, they can have like permitted parking or something like that. Because I think the East Isles Neighborhood Association folks, kind of the main, wealthy homeowners north of the mall, they were able to kind of co-opt that sort of renter working class message.
Well,
People need cars to get to where they're going. That's something that Commissioner Menz said when he flipped.
yeah.
And, I think possibly we could have kind of lessened fears people had about losing their spots, which is visceral. It's a visceral thing that people feel, even though, they could just have walked a block north and parked there. I think that's what, when you say anti-car, I don't even, or pro-car, I don't even think this was like a pro-car, pro-parking thing. I think it was I don't want people parking in my neighborhood, in front of my house.
Yes.
I think it was just, I said it was NIMBY in a post online, and then I had someone come in and testify and get really mad and said that I should kind of recant that because NIMBY, rightfully so, has become, to be poorly connotated with your views on the world. And the person was like, if I was NIMBY, I would want the green space and not the parking because parking's bad. Uh-huh. It was very funny. But I think that it stemmed from NIMBY issues. And what our study showed is that there's plenty of parking north of the mall, and that's where people are going to go park. And I think people didn't like that. So
I believe the renter stuff was just a talking point. I hear that on every street project.
Yeah.
And it's because people get used to the equity argument is the one that should prevail. Mm-hmm. And the people, the more conservative types are like, oh, you're going to use equity?
Yeah.
I'm going to throw equity back at you.
Yep.
And we're going to do it my way.
Absolutely.
And so I believe this was not about the renters nearby at all. Like, legitimately, they were probably upset about it. Do I believe these decisions were made to help them? Not at all. It was a talking point, and you could have won over the renters and gotten them to say, okay, I don't mind, go ahead. And it still would have happened this way because the people, that this was really responsive to wanted it to happen this way. And the person you're talking about is a former state DFL chair. So,
yeah, I mean, he knew the system, right? And that's what, unfortunately, the park board still caters to. And what our whole planning process and why I was so adamant during this whole time of it's so important that we follow this is because it means that any of our community planning process goes out the window. Like, there were a lot of people that put a lot of time into this very specific plan. And we use equity metrics to, assign people to our CAC process, to our planning process. And we, try to make sure that we have a really diverse set of viewpoints and voices. And we also try to ensure that the plans we make and that, the plans that these folks are kind of looking at, and we try to say, hey, these are our goals as a park board. Our goals are to increase green space. Our goals are to fight climate change. Our goals are to create spaces where people can actually be and recreate, particularly in our denser, more urban areas. Yes, it's near lakes, but there's not a lot of, full-on parkland within the uptown area. And that's exactly what they brought us back with. We had a really good, solid plan. And now that whole thing is delegitimized because these people got the ear of a friendly commissioner, Commissioner Schaefer, who was willing to go to bat for them, and she really, really pushed it hard, and other commissioners sided with her. And we had, Charles Rucker came on and around when we started talking about this, and he's a firefighter, and so he was able to get the, fire chief of Minneapolis to weigh in, even though, again, the safety issues saying it is really dubious.
I loved the fire chief's email to Rucker or whatever it was. It was weird to have a commissioner come in and say, look, I got an email from my boss and it says this. Like, would that happen on any other topic?
No.
If one of the commissioners wasn't a firefighter with like political imperatives of his own to have a certain result. And the fire chief was like, oh, I haven't looked at any plans, but as it's been described to me or something like that. It's like, this is not how it's done. That was so disappointing.
It really is disappointing, and it's really because it starts to, breed in sort of not, for me, not necessarily distrust, but just like a bit of animosity towards the fire department, because obviously, they do such great work. They respond to so many, medical calls, and then, less actual fire calls, which, we all, again, like any good urbanist knows that fire trucks are too big. But it's kind of, stay in your lane. It's kind of like, okay, well, why are you coming in on this one thing when, most of our parkways are not up to the technical code, right? But they have not resulted in any excess civilian deaths.
Right.
And so this wouldn't have either. If a truck needed to, go over onto the curb or whatever, like, they can do that. I live on a street now. I don't know the exact design term, but I'm near a school. And so they cut off the street halfway with those curves, right, that go kind of diagonal.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we would have done. And those are all over our city. And those sorts of things are all over our city. So it's misusing safety, as we've kind of talked about it.
And the design that they ended up going with does not satisfy the supposed standards coming from the fire chief. The thing that they were objecting to, not meeting the standards, they ended up adopting a plan, doesn't meet the standards. I don't know if it was you or Becky Alper who was like, okay, if we're gonna do this your way, we're gonna meet the standards you're setting out that have us reject the long range plan, right? And nobody wanted any part of that.
No.
It was such a farce.
Well, yeah, so I brought forward an amendment that said, okay, if we're going to do this, then let's do it everywhere. Or if we're going to do this, then let's get rid of parking. Because we would have to take 8 feet from, or 10 feet from like the parking lane width, or I think, 8 feet from the parking lane, or 8 feet from green space. What do we think? Cedar's looking pretty calm.
Yeah, what do you think? Go out on it? Let's do it.
We can try. We can go by Hidden Beach, our old stopping grounds. And yeah, no, they didn't want any, obviously. And so, yeah, there's an amendment out there kind of that shows there's a vote out there that shows a bit of the hypocrisy.
What is it like to, are we done with this topic, Tom? I didn't mean to make this about the mall, but
no, we can move on.
It stirs up my passions.
It stirs up mine too. It's one of those things, it's very, and, part of me wants to be like, okay, well, in the grand scheme, it's not that much space or whatever, but it's it's the principle, it's the idea of who we listen to in this park system,
and
right?
missed opportunities, right? They say like the best time to plant a tree is like 30 years ago. Well, these are trees that we're not planting for potentially decades because we were going to get free money from the Met Council.
Yeah, $300K.
To redo this, add some green space, and I can't stop going on this topic. But I want to ask you.
We can pivot, yeah.
I want to ask you what it's like to serve with Becca Thompson.
Becca, it's something I've found is I like every single one of my fellow commissioners personally. Even, Kathy and I are probably, we are like, two
she
siblings.
Hates you. Tom, she hates you. I can see it on her face. She hates you. So don't do her the solid of liking her.
I think outside of our politics and being on the board, I think if we were like, family friends or something like that, I think we could absolutely get along. And so, yeah, even Commissioner Thompson, I can get along with. But yeah, it's, one of those things where, I've just seen that, I don't really feel that she's the best public servant, and we've obviously disagreed on quite a few things. I think myself kind of more progressive, and I've seen a lot of kind of the takes and kind of the decisions and policies she's made have been more reactionary, more fear-based, and that's just where we disagree. And now she's moving on to other pastures. I was going to say greener, but we'll see what happens.
Is Kathy Abeni not running?
Oh, Kathy? Oh, Kathy is. Yeah.
Oh.
No, she's running again.
Oh,
I was talking about Thompson.
Oh, the whole time you were talking about Thompson. When I said the person who I think hates you because I've seen the expression on her face, I was talking about Kathy Abeni.
Oh yeah. I was transitioning, but
Okay.
No, Kathy.
We don't have to talk about Kathy Abeni. I won't subject you to that.
Well, the thing about Kathy is, so she's kind of technocratic, right? She's an engineer.
Right. But she thinks everyone else is stupid.
There's a bit of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think there's part. This is me. Playing armchair psychologist. There could be none of this, and it could just be all politics and stuff. But I think there is a bit of, young white guy, looks just kind of like a typical jockey dude or whatever. Coming in to these spaces and disagreeing vehemently with her, and trying to do things in a very different way than she would do, and I think that kind of grates a little bit. And it's.
Well, I don't know that it's
certainly
just
dynamic.
you. I feel like it's her and everyone else. We don't need to turn this into an episode about Kathy Abeni.
Okay. Yeah, but I I would gladly have a beer with her, and whatnot. But yeah, Becca Thompson, it's been interesting. She's certainly honest as far as her emotions and what she thinks and says.
Did you hear that she filed a campaign finance complaint against me because I had opinions about her on the podcast?
Yeah, that's. She has filed data requests against fellow commissioners Menz and Alper.
Oh, really?
She specifically on the topics around. Oh, we got a merganser up there. Nice. Specifically around, I think it was the emerald ash borer and the tree issue in North Minneapolis. And when that was going on, she was being hammered by her constituents, by her community, for not really doing enough. And so, she was kind of, I think, looking for collusion, coordination on that. And so, she filed under her stage name, or not her stage name, her, I think it was, or her maiden name.
Well, she's an actress. She was in a vampire TV show back in 2003.
Yeah, she was an Angel, and Angel's great. I'm actually on a rewatch of Buffy right now, and that's going pretty well. And so, she is no stranger to, being sort of litigious when she has disagreements.
And having theories about why she's having a bad time. Like it's somebody else's fault. Somebody did this to me.
Yes. Yep, there's lots of that. Again, because I don't like, talking too bad about people. Personally, you put Beck and I in a room and we can talk and we can gab and we can have a good time. And I think that's important on the park board, particularly because, it doesn't necessarily, these votes don't really come down to your kind of typical, progressive, moderate, progressive, conservative Democrat all the time. It does a little bit, but there are plenty of times where she and I have been voting together on something, that I really care about. And then, we'll turn around and we'll, really be against each other. And so I think that's something that sort of the last iteration of the park board, which I think did a lot of good. And there are a lot of mentalities from that park board that I wish we kept. But they did turn into kind of a very acrimonious board. And I think that was then kind of bleeding into, what the voters were seeing, and that's kind of how we got this sort of conservative whiplash.
I don't know that the whiplash was all that strong on the park board. Like, I have hated the park board probably the whole time I've lived here. I have never felt good about the park board. I
Yeah.
like John Cogill,
Yep.
the president that we had for like 2 years, I think it was. But I've never felt great about the park board. Why do you think that is? Why does the park board suck so bad? Is it that good people don't want to do this job?
So, I mean, that is absolutely a part of it. You have to be very privileged to be able to do this job in the first place. It's part-time, but, it can run anywhere from, as few as like maybe just 5 hours a week to 20, 25 hours a week. It depends, if you have the votes to get stuff done and how much you have to meet with staff and how much you have to do and how much you have to respond to constituents. And, the pay, it's like something like $17,000 a year. But it really requires a lot of commitment. And so, I don't have kids. I have a job that I work really, really hard during session for 6 months of the year at the Capitol. And then when we're in interim, I have plenty of work from home days. I have, a lot of flexibility, and there's a lot of understanding with my specific job. And that's, a lot of my fellow commissioners, like, Commissioner Forney, she's retired. Elizabeth Schaefer, she doesn't have a job outside of the park board, I believe. So it's her primary duty, so she's able to put a lot of time in it. And, Commissioner Benny.
Are you making a crack about her being the wealthiest person in Minneapolis?
She would be close. I mean, her campaign finance report, or not finance report, is it conflict of interest, or I forget what it's called.
Financial disclosure? Financial
disclosure, right? Like I think she had like lots of investments in I think military companies, right? It was Raytheon on there.
Basically every company that exists, she had like and it was like, had to be a minimum, some like astonishingly high minimum, like all of these companies?
Yeah. If you like work in like the service industry or something, or if you work, if you're doing some labor job, like it's going to be very difficult to juggle this job. And there's almost no thanks. It's not like, you get a lot of glory or praise or whatever. It's you really have to do it. Like, you really just have to like the city and like parks, and you have to be a bit of a political nerd and a bit of a sicko to do it and care about it.
And you're coming back for another 4 years. I can't imagine doing this for 8 years, Tom. Can you imagine doing this for 8 years?
Yeah, I was actually really close to not running for re-election.
Tell me all the reasons you were not going to do it.
It is very stressful. It's really, really stressful. Like, every time, I'm not going to go completely talk about them all again, but, every time we went into those votes, there's a lot of work, and it's really stressful. It's really like, your adrenaline gets pumping.
It's emotional.
It's personal. It's like, I know I'm going up against a lot of my colleagues, and, and you try to call who you can, but you can't even, we don't have staff. Because of open meeting laws, you can only ever talk to 2 of your additional colleagues. And so you have to try to find before a vote.
Right.
So you have to kind of try to find a way to, convince those folks. And so it's stressful. It's a lot of time. I would like to get my every other Wednesdays back. And this is quite pleasant, but things like this, I could be doing this with whatever.
Spending time with an influencer like me? What other job could you do that?
Never mind. Yeah, you're right. You know what? This is a huge perk. I get to stare at your butt crack. No, it's actually mostly covered. I also, if you're looking at the electoral situation, I think it's hard to be optimistic about getting toward 5 votes. It's, I think Stephanie Musich is pretty secure where she is. I think that Kathy Abeni is very secure. She does have an opponent. We'll see. She's not the biggest campaigner. As I said, she's kind of more technocratic, and she doesn't love the whole politics of it. But still, that's she kind of, I think, fits her district.
I'm technocratic, Tom, and I don't agree with her on basically anything. I feel like I'm a technocrat.
Yeah,
I may not have a degree, but I respect experts, and I respect whether it's city staff or park board planning staff. There are professionals looking at this,
right?
And to claim to be a technocrat and I'm an engineer, while also going against what the professionals are advising you to do, you're not a technocrat. You're too generous, Tom.
Okay.
Kathy Abeni is not a technocrat. She just got some opinions like anyone else, and she's implementing her worldview, and it has nothing to do with expertise at all.
It is something I've noticed. So Becky Alper, fantastic. She's not doing it again because of family and just being able to have the time and to focus on other things. And she's an expert on design of roads and transit systems, right?
Right.
And so that's her day job. She works at a design firm where she does grants and does all this stuff. And so when an issue area in her expertise comes up, we don't seem to respect it as much. Whereas with Kathy's, water stuff, it seems like we're very deferential. So I see a little bit of that.
We're lucky to have you, Tom. We're lucky that you're gonna beat your head against the wall for another 4 years. I don't know if people realize how lucky they are to have you.
I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. That's one of the reasons why I'm running again is, I don't know, I feel like, it would be letting down folks who have been kind of with me and supporting me, and, it is service ultimately, right?
Yeah.
And so it's about, going in and doing the hard work and trying to be, a practical voice, trying to be someone who's so my day job, I work for the DFL. I see how the political philosophies and the policies that we try to implement as DFLers, every day at the Capitol. And I just try to bring that to the city. I'm just trying to bring that locally. It seems like, obviously, I'm guessing most everyone voted for, the DFL, although I have some questions about everyone on the board. And at the state level, we're kind of in lockstep with who we support. But then when it comes to local issues, we just kind of abandon it. And we start to say, okay, well, actually, status quo is important. And it's important that we, kind of listen to the same old groups, and it's important that we kind of do things, how we have been. And so, I'm just trying to bring those values and keep them and implement them, and we'll see. We'll see. I mean, this is gorgeous.
It is a lovely day. We're heading into the wind again.
Yeah.
What did you come to this podcast recording hoping that we would talk about?
Oh gosh, I don't know. We've kind of covered. I mean, parkways again, super important for me. Super important for me that we maintain our youth programming and funding to the extent we have, and we cut as little as possible. We're going to head into, the park board really gets screwed when it comes to the budget process in Minneapolis.
Do you like the BET? Do you think the BET should continue to exist? Do you have your eye on reforms? What?
I don't think I've thought enough about it to have a strong opinion that we should not have a BAT or should. It's hard to know. Sometimes you have a system that is imperfect and you don't love it, but then what's next could be quite worse, right? I like some of the things that Steve Brandt has been saying about, potentially pursuing an income tax model.
Right.
Moving away from property taxes so we can, kind of have a more progressive tax system, right? Taxing wealthy more. Because property taxes, hit, low-income folks and fixed-income folks like pretty hard. And
So when you say the park board gets screwed when it comes to the budget, what do you mean by that?
so we are just reliant on the BET, on the city council, on the mayor to give us the property increases, tax increases, and the revenue generation that we need to maintain the service levels we have. And so property taxes collections are going way down, obviously, because of commercial property rates, and the city not, we have to transition kind of away from that and transition downtown Minneapolis, so that property is generating enough value and revenue. So we get like 80% of our budget is from property taxes, and the rest is from like fees and fines and like state government aid and assistance. The city, I think they rely something around like between 50 and 60% on property taxes, and they get a lot more from like fines and fees and other things. So we're just overly reliant, and we're not very flexible. So what we're looking at is, in the next couple of years, next few budget cycles, if things continue as they are, and we'll still have Trump fucking things up at the federal level and screwing up the economy and cutting funding for programs, we're gonna have to cut a lot. And it's gonna be my intention to make sure that that doesn't hit our youth, because the youth, and working and making sure, all right, now we really have to go in the wind.
Talking about the budget and going heavy into the wind,
Yeah.
Tom Olsen is a park board all-star.
Yeah, we got, I don't know what we have here, maybe 15 knots of wind. We are making slow progress.
No progress. We are stationary.
And so the thing is, these youth positions, they're so critical because you feel like you can cut them. You feel like, all right, it's too bad, we'll move on. But you start to see these downstream effects that are just really not great for the city. And they're also things that, it's like, it's an increased, crime, or, increased, vandalism, or whatever you have, or, poor educational outcomes. It leads to all these bad things that then we have more reactionary policies that, well, now we need to spend more money on, policing, and less on public housing, and less on, services for, the homeless and stuff like that. And it just has all this downstream consequences. And so I'm going to try to make that a priority as we move forward through these difficult budget times. And I hope whatever the next board is, I hope they agree with that. It seems like, folks have been saying that and are kind of feeling that way. Although, as a board, I constantly lose votes, John. I don't know. I lose most of the votes on the park board.
That's
and
what
so
they say about Tom Olsen. He loses most of the votes.
I lose most of the votes, so I'm always seem to be on the wrong side of things. But so the board voted to cut, these 3 youth positions. Now they're saying, oh, well, they aren't filled.
Are we talking about Elizabeth Schaefer again?
We are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so she did that so that we could have $300,000 for parkway or park path trail paving. And I don't know if you saw at Loring Park, we did some repaving. That covers not even that amount of repaving. So it's a very small amount, and it's 3 positions. And it was, again, against staff wishes. It was against the advice of our rec director. Because when you cut that position, it's very hard to get new FTEs. The thought was, oh, well, we'll just add it back. But the thing is, our budget's turning sour. And so those positions, as far as I can tell, look like they're going to be a permanent loss.
Right.
And, it's just kind of a short-sighted decision. Like, okay, yeah, my, 5 minutes of my bike ride around the Grand Rounds will be a little smoother. but we lost out on these positions that could potentially be helping out, like, you know, a dozen youth each a year. You know, who knows, you know, the specifics, but a lot of kids, you know, and we're always talking about that sort of stuff in this city, right?
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things of living values again, and we didn't quite do it.
I've got a blister.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
these wooden oars are just hell on my hands.
I mean, that oar looks like it was, you know, used about, you know, sometime in the 70s. And my friend
oar.
found it somewhere in the dirt somewhere. It is not.
So your friend has a canoe, but only has one sort of functional oar?
Well, so we got this from my wife's best friend's dad. He wanted to get rid of his canoe, so we got it, and we took it on a trip down Minnehaha Creek from Lake Minnetonka, which was very fun. I highly recommend it if people can get their hands on a boat of some sort. Particularly around Edina, it gets really fast and rapidy, and you're kind of curving around the bends. It's very cool. So we set in though after this waterfall in Edina, and we really were dumb, and we ended up flipping our canoe.
Oh no!
And the rapids took one of the oars away that look like the one I have.
Okay.
So we lost that.
I got the reject oar.
You got the reject oar. So anyway, so it's now kind of our communal canoe. We'll be storing it at my place, and I plan to get a better paddle so that I don't have to stick any more influencers with a blister-producing paddle.
Are there any hidden gems of Minneapolis parks? What's something you really enjoy that you think other people are missing out on?
You know, having canoed the entirety of Minnehaha Creek, most of the rest of the creek is, you know, next to kind of commercial, industrial land or highways. You know, towards the top there, you know, it's mostly wetlands. And then the majority is just people's backyards. Whereas our part in Minneapolis, and why Minneapolis is such a fantastic city, is our best assets are public. Except for here in Cedar Lake, where we're passing right now.
Yeah, people built their mansions here so nobody would be able to walk along the lakeshore. They've been encroaching for decades, Tom. What are we going to do about that?
So that came up in our Cedar Isles master plan. Although we're not supposed to use the word master plan anymore. So our Cedar Isles plan. Long range plan. What we found is the land that we would have access to was so thin and would need so much work, you know, we would need to put in a whole boardwalk pretty much, that it would be really, really expensive. And then building a bridge over it would be really expensive. You know, I still hope that we are moving towards that, and it should be our intention within the plan. It's something that we'll continue to look at. It's not dead. But, you know, part of me is, okay, we do that, we set that in the plan, you know, and then a decade, 2 decades from now, you know, is that, you know, $800,000, is that $1 million that we have to spend to make that land public? And it's also already in one of the wealthiest parts of the city. So I don't like it. I'm not sure if it's a priority at this point. But, you know, if you walk along it, you can technically do that. You know, they wouldn't be able to say you're trespassing.
Tom, are you an extrovert?
Kinda. I don't know. I think I vacillate.
Yeah?
I mean, I will gladly spend, you know, 8 hours just playing video games in a day.
Okay, my guy.
You know, I'm a big computer game guy, big, you know, strategic map games.
Ooh, what games are we talking about here?
Oh, gosh. I mean, so like...
Civilization, you get into
Civilization, absolutely. You know, the Total War games, for sure. You know, the Paradox games, Europa Universalis. You know, the real nerd stuff where you're
basically... Did you ever get into Stellaris?
I love Stellaris. Yeah. I got into Stellaris. I would conquer the galaxy, you know. Start as the, you know, did some good guy runs where we're all a democracy and we're friends and we're fighting an existential threat together. And I've done ones where, I'm a mad robot race that enslaves populations and exterminates planets. It's it really lets you live a full set of political values, I guess. Jeez. But Solaris is good. Love that one. City Skylines.
What I've been getting into recently, did you ever play XCOM?
Oh yeah, that game will make you tear your hair out.
Oh, I got into I think it was XCOM 2.
Yeah.
Is that the one that was recently out?
Yeah, I think it came out like
2015?
Maybe like 8 years ago or something like that, but
and then
it's a good one. You'll have your like top soldiers and then they'll just get iced by an alien,
Right.
It's brutal.
So a game that is similar to that is Alien. So it's basically an Alien themed, like the movie franchise Alien, but like XCOM. It's got some twists. I feel like it was really well done. That genre of game, like I feel like the way they did it.
Tactical RPG maybe.
Yeah,
is what
the
it's called.
Alien version of that. I feel like that was excellent. If anyone is into XCOM and they want to play a version of that is just perfectly done.
Perfect panel for him.
Yeah. We he has let me know how inadequate it is. So
People are making fun of me for my paddle.
Wow, Minnesota Nice includes ragging on a poor man's small paddle. This really is like, it's hard to come up with hidden gems of our park system when our very obvious gems are just so shiny.
They're all out in the open.
They're so illustrious. This is great. Look at all these people, look at all these families out enjoying their time on a beautiful Saturday morning. It's hard to beat. I've been to a lot of countries around the world, and we have a really special thing going on. And that's kind of, there's questions about, should we keep a park board? Should we get rid of it? Just make it a city department? I kind of see arguments both ways, but the one thing that's for sure is as long as you have a park board, you're going to have people fighting for the interests exclusively of parks.
Or parking. I call it the Minneapolis Parking Board.
Yeah, and well, for now, who knows? There could be a sea change in years to come.
What would it take to change the park board, Tom? Is it a matter of making it a more attractive, like professional job that you won't have to ruin your life to do?
I think it's probably more of, our, progressive organizations have to, create appealing pipelines for it. And, it doesn't have to be 8 years, 12 years. Like, I think it's perfectly fine to run for park board, serve on it for 4 years because you have, basic principles, and then go back to your, civilian life or, move on to if you want to keep public service doing something else. So I think there's not really any sort of progressive coordination on the more progressive, YIMBY, urbanist side of things when it comes to getting folks to do it. Ultimately, it'll be hard to make it really appealing for someone to, potentially, drop out of to leave their job or take a hiatus from their job to do, because, you'd have to be paying at least, somewhere around like $80,000 or something like that. And that's going to be really hard to vote for. It's really hard. We're in charge of deciding that in the budget. And I just don't know how, maybe if you had a lot of folks who are outgoing, so leaving the park board, I don't know how you would get that many folks to vote to, raise their salaries that much and then, potentially result in cuts or important services not getting as much as they need. So, I think it just, it needs to come down to organization and encouraging folks to get out there and run. And, there are some good folks. going.
Because the legislature is part-time pay. I guess you're only in session for a little bit of the year, so there's that perk.
Yeah.
But we don't have a problem attracting good people to run for the state legislature, I feel like. Like,
Well-
there's plenty of high-quality people that run for the state legislature.
Oh,
On
yeah.
the park board, it's just a bunch of clunkers. Aside from you, Tom.
And Becky Alford.
And
She's
Becky.
good.
I love Becky.
So the legislature, it's a little more prestigious. You know, it feels a little more meaningful to be a state legislature than to be on the park board. And, you know, more people get into politics for some of the issues that you can affect at the state level.
Right.
You know? Like, you know, when we're talking about like enshrining abortion access or, you know, ensuring that, you know, ICE isn't, you know, begging people off the streets or whatever. Like, that's the sort of stuff that you would go into state politics if you're trying to, you know, fulfill those political values.
And the people who run for park board are like, I was upset about this thing that changed near my house, and now I have been inspired to run and make sure things stay the same forever.
Yes.
We got some birds out here, Tom.
Yeah, bird sanctuary. At least to the right it is. I think maybe to the left as well. But another thing about the legislature too is, you know, you have staff. You know, you have folks who are working for you, working with you to, you know, get your bills drafted, get your bills researched. You know, it's my job to, you know, help folks with emails, to help folks with press releases and social and stuff.
Oh, you're in communications?
Yeah. But park board is part-time throughout the whole year. You are meeting every other week. You're meeting with constituents throughout the whole year. You are constantly legislating and reading agendas and proposing amendments yourself that you have to write and craft yourself and think of yourself and do the staff meetings and set the staff meetings up yourself. So it's part-time, but it's a lot of labor compared to the legislature, I would say. Whereas the legislature, you kind of know when you're going to be working really hard. Although you're running more often, so I don't know. It goes both ways.
So the new cannabis rules, Tom,
Yeah.
how did you feel about that?
So I feel happy about them because I think the alternative was full criminalization.
Okay.
I think if I could have had my way, I would say let's you know, potentially just allow it. I don't think it's not even have it be prohibited because, you know, secondhand marijuana smoke, while maybe unappealing, it's certainly not dangerous. It's not a drug that's, you know, I'm even for more open alcohol and within our parks.
Ooh, you want to get everybody drunk in the parks?
Yeah, I think people do it all over the place. I mean, we have, you know, Anoka and Stillwater, they're having their own entertainment districts. So why can't we have an entertainment district that includes the park, you know? But that, and I even recognize though that, you know, alcohol is far more corrosive to society than marijuana, cannabis. So I think, you know, just having it be a rule, I think is great. You know, you will be able to, you know, surreptitiously, you know, smoke a joint at Hidden Beach or whatever, and I think you'll be just fine. And there's not going to be any sort of misdemeanor tied to it, any sort of fine. Which, you know, we were really concerned that if something like that went through, you know, how's that going to be enforced? Well, it's probably going to be enforced unequally. And who's it going to affect? Well, if it was someone like me, it probably wouldn't affect me much at all. But if you're someone with, you know, insecure immigration status, that could be really devastating, right? So we don't have that, and I think that's great, especially when a lot of other cities are putting on really significant and hefty fines on that sort of consumption of cannabis. And then I'll say on the THC side, I think it's great. You know, you can bring in a THC drink to our park. There's nothing against that, you know, and you'll be able to buy it at our concessions once our concessions kind of figure that out for themselves. So I think we have one of the more liberal policies in the state of Minnesota, and I think that's huge. And I think, you know, it's because, you know, the majority of the board wanted that and supported decriminalization. And we did this survey and we had like 3,000 plus responses, which is quite significant. I asked staff if that's like the highest we've ever had as a response rate, and they said it was top 3, potentially the second most responded. And basically not everyone. So basically, I think it was like 55% or something around there. 50% wanted, liked the policy as we wrote it. So it's prohibited, but it's not fined, and it's just treated the same as tobacco. And then equal parts wanted it to be more liberal, so no prohibition at all. And then equal parts wanted it to be a misdemeanor or a fine or a full ordinance against. So I think we struck a good balance, and I think we will never hear about marijuana in our parks ever again, because it'll just become a part of daily life. And that's what I was going for.
Sorry to bring up the mall again,
Yeah.
but at the Ward 7 convention, during the candidate Q&A for the city council candidates, there was a question like, tell us about a time when you went against your allies. And Elizabeth Schaefer's answer to that was about the mall. Like the opposite of the truth there. She went with her allies to go against park staff, and she made it seem like, well, I went against park staff on that one, and park staff are my allies.
Oh. Yeah, no, I mean,
No, you went against park staff, the professionals,
Yes.
so that you could join with your allies to do the wrong thing. It was a political character question, and she gave the example of her failing a test.
I would certainly say, I will say, I think there are times where staff has been wrong. There have been times where, they are not, they're human, they're not perfect, they are experts on most things, and I think this process, they did everything perfect, as well as they can, as far as engagement, as far as finding out a good plan for the space, as far as making sure it's safe and everything. So I think there are times where, yeah, you can go against staff, but to frame them as your allies when you are, the other side is, East Isles Neighborhood Association and folks who are very clearly
Your closest supporters.
Your very core kind of group of constituents and supporters, and your base, I would say, that's certainly
Well, Tom, we're almost ready to sign off here.
cool.
Is there anything else you wanted to say before we go?
Just if you're listening to this, spread the word. Tell your friends about it. It matters. If it's something you're interested in, maybe you don't run this time, but maybe you think about it. Maybe you kind of look at the issues and you find something that galvanizes you. I also say, it's the park board and everything we have within it. It is malleable, and it is something that you as a citizen can effectuate. Even if you're not an elected official, if you don't run for office, sending emails matters. My colleagues get and testimony and in-person testimony. People will change their minds if they see testimony and if they have folks talking to them. So I would just encourage you to, you don't have to pay attention to every little thing, but here and there get involved, make sure that you're not being out voiced by, folks who know the system and are really privileged. So, that's something that, last 4 years have been kind of defined by that kind of side of things, and folks on our, on the board, are really affected by that. So, keep participating, don't get discouraged. We still have an amazing system. It's about the difference between creating a very good system and something that's, truly beyond compare. And that's what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for us to move on as a park board on things like parkways, on things like marijuana, on things like youth, on things like, what we're investing in, how we're listening to people, to really make it work in a system that's serving everyone equally as well.
Okay, well, get involved in, if you're a delegate, the city convention is coming up in July, and Tom Olsen will be up for endorsement as an at-large member. Everyone in the city is eligible to vote for Tom. You've got a good, solid name, Tom, and to explain to listeners how you have made it at this point in your career, I recently changed, so it was today actually, I changed the O in your last name to E.
Yeah.
That's how you know you have made it in my mind. Because
That is huge.
in my contacts, it's Olsen.
SEN, and my corny joke that I say in my in my speeches is spelt the right way, and that gets a good chuckle from
Only from people this is their first and only convention of the year. Me, who's gone to multiple, I'm tired of your jokes, Tom.
I know, but you gotta. It's speech writing. You know, you gotta have good cadence. You gotta have jokes and stuff. People are primed to support generic, like, white guy candidate in this place. Because last time when I ran, I was doing phone calls and I was speaking with this constituent. I was like, yeah, I'm running, blah blah blah. And he's like, Olsen, huh? Well, that's a good name. That's good enough for me. You got my vote. And it's like,
yeah,
it is wild. I've had that conversation. Having my name spelt wrong, I would say 50% of the time is a small price to pay for the...
Makes me feel like I should run for mayor. John Edwards, what a good, solid white guy name that is.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we just, we come from... I think that's, I think Fry gets that boost, absolutely,
Right.
He's just in the mold of Rybeck, of Mondale, of...
Although, most people I talk to will say Frey. I'm like,
yeah.
Wait, you talk about politics nonstop online and you're telling me Jacob Frey?
Yeah.
Like, you don't even know how to say the mayor's name?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Well, Tom, thank you for joining us here on the Wedge Live podcast, the canoe episode.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad we made it through the chaos of Bidemakiska.
Yeah, and I'm your host, John Edwards. This has been the Wedge Live podcast. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.